All right, cool. We're back again. We took
Okay.
another little break.
Okay. So, did the experience emotionally or spiritually affect you? If so, how? You spoke a little bit about the spiritual, but you can go into more depth and then also adding the emotional.
So I think this spiritually it changed me in that sense. Well, I feel like it in the spiritual sense. Having seen that space of kind of contentedness, it. I spoke about this in the other video as well. The thing that really affected me was this idea of the fact that there is no refuge, in the sense that
Yeah.
there is no kind of escape from. There's no permanent escape from pain and suffering, and that's kind of what I think I'd been seeking. But when I kind of realized, well, I'm just kind of piecing it together now. The kind of understanding of it is now having like very briefly touched this space of just complete contentedness. It's like whatever pain and suffering I was feeling is there when I don't feel that contentedness and gratitude. And it's not that that's like something to escape from, but it's just something to. It's something that can be lived with if you simultaneously have the contentedness. Like if you're content, then pain and suffering can be faced. But it's like prior to that, I was just searching for some kind of refuge. And so having realized that there's no kind of ultimate refuge other than just learning to live with reality, that's kind of allowed me to emotionally, I think, be a bit less reserved as well as less reactive. Like you wouldn't peg it to me, I don't think, but I can get very angry. And so like Anya's like probably the only person really in my life that can attest to that. But I have a lot of anger which can rise up very quickly, and like things like that I've noticed more of a slower reaction, because I see that whatever I was getting angry at was just seeking refuge and not finding it. And now that I realize that no wonder I'm not finding it, it's not meant to be done like that. I'm not getting as like intensely drawn into feelings of anger, but also simultaneously not getting as intensely drawn into those pleasure feelings. Like I don't seek the marijuana as much. I'm smoking more than I'm smoking shit ton less than I was, but I still have like a couple joints throughout the day. But like it just makes everything less forceful, not as easily pulled to anger, not as easily pulled to lust. I haven't watched porn the whole time I was away since I've been back, and a week before. I'm probably almost a month of not watching porn. That's like never happened since I was
Wow.
16 or something. So it's like
Wow.
everything of the world just has less of a pull, and there's more of a kind of anchored. Something's anchored within, in the center. So I'm not pulled in every direction emotionally.
So maybe like, so it seems like something that had more of a hold on you before is it's slowly starting to, it's like showing how slowly starting to like deteriorate. It's not becoming as strong of a pull back
Yeah,
than it was before.
yeah.
Mm. Mm. And do you feel like that came from understanding certain things, or like how did you become like how did those pulls, those things that had such a pull on you, how did they become less strong as a like less strong in your life to hold you down?
Well, I think that's what's it's difficult, because I think half of it is half of me thinks it's kind of like I don't know what actually why it had that effect. I'm only kind of really piecing half of it together now, in the sense that like it makes sense having reached this kind of space of stillness and not wanting, and that having a certain sense of refreshingness or like revitalizingness, that would then make me less inclined to seek elsewhere for that same revitalization. You know what I mean? But also like there has been somewhat of an understanding awareness, in the extent that like having that stillness made me, or allowed me the space to see myself clearly, in the extent that these addictions were things I was going outside myself to seek refuge in. And now that I'm aware of what I was doing in that sense, I know that that's futile. Like I know there is going to be no refuge there. that is the understanding part of it, which I guess has really bolstered all of that. What's happened?
So I know that a lot of people experience this, something similar to the regard of like they're going throughout their lives and they're living one way for so long, and then all of a sudden they have a realization like the one you had, right?
Mm.
How did you feel in realizing something but knowing that you have wasted some of your life, like in kind of on the wrong road? Like, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
I understand
how
what you're
did that
saying.
make you feel?
Well, I'm lucky, I guess, because I had a lot of other This big realization was premised by not so much realizations, but just understandings of the world, which I have gotten a lot from Buddhism. I don't. The way I see things is that whatever time spent with these addictions, say marijuana, living in a daze, porn, always expending my energy, the years I spent in that space was almost like you seen a butterfly, they spend time in a cocoon. It's like that. It's like we all necessarily must nestle within a certain amount of pain and suffering until we can break through it. So none of it's wasted time. It's just when things are meant to happen.
Damn, that's beautifully put. And I feel like when you're in that cocoon, you do appreciate and love your wings once you obtain them as well.
Yeah.
You remember how it was to suffer,
Exactly.
be in pain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No
Wow.
shit.
Yeah.
It's a good
That's
analogy.
great. Damn, you heard it here first. The Cocoon by Raz, man. Damn that. That's gonna be one of your songs one day. You gotta put that metaphor in there. Wow, that's it's very insightful, and I believe
Yeah.
it's true too. It's
Yeah,
very
it
true.
does work. It's like, the freedom that comes with flight is like release from that pain. It's a great metaphor. Nice.
So going back to let's fly on back to the forest. Uh, did you feel more alone in the forest or back home?
Um, yeah, definitely in the forest felt more alone. Yeah,
So
primarily just not
how
having
about
Anya, I would
this?
say. Hmm.
Okay, so how about in your room alone or alone in the forest? Is there a difference?
Yes, actually, in my room alone, I'm alone. But say for example, I've gone out for a walk in the forest. There was this one lake I would go to, like a very small lake, only like 30 meters across each way, so it's still within the forest. But I'll go and sit at that lake alone. But there's so much nature and butterflies and bugs flying around and birds and kangaroos even, that you don't I didn't feel necessarily seen by an individual, because obviously none of these creatures could even speak English, but I felt almost like connected with them in the silence, you know what I mean? More so even than you feel connected with people sometimes. Yeah, that's weird. When I was out there in nature, definitely you don't feel alone, you just feel like part of it.
What about if you're in your room? Do you ever are you ever alone but yet not feel alone?
In the room.
Just like what I'm saying is just like you're alone anywhere,
Yeah,
but you don't feel alone.
yeah. Yeah, I definitely feel there are times where I feel connected to people even when they're not around, but I think to a lesser extent.
Mm. Do you ever feel like that spiritual connection when you're alone?
Yeah, I feel that very strongly. But that seems more
Mm.
less of a connection to other people, more of a like connection. It's like a connection to divinity. We would speak of it, like something otherworldly. Nothing of this world, but that which
Yeah,
that which gives you life in this world, but is yet beyond this world. A deep connection to that.
I I agree. I agree. So my other question is, did you feel more self-love in the forest or back home?
Definitely more in the forest, because the head monk leading this thing, his called Ajahn Brahm. He's like, I don't know how to put him in words, but he's very keen on kindness, which is something I was not previously. I don't know. I don't think I'd ever thought about kindness that much, even less so kindness towards myself. But he kind of drilled that into everyone while we were there when he gave us the lectures that we need to be, if we're going to be kind towards the rest of the world, we need to offer that kindness to ourselves as well, equally.
Do you feel like there was a point in your life you were giving more love away than you were receiving? Or vice versa?
From myself, yeah. I would say most of the time. I think I would try and give it out to get some, not realizing that I'm supposed to also give it to myself. Yeah.
How do you see yourself giving yourself self-love? Because I know there's people out there who struggle with that. How do you give yourself like self-love?
Yeah, that's a good question. Hey, I think the biggest thing for me is just being like, say for example you had like a fucking puppy, right? Or a kitten. Something that like is very fresh and new and like doesn't really know how to live in the world yet. And if it like fucking shits on the carpet or something, you kind of are less inclined to get angry at it because you know that it doesn't know what the fuck it's doing. So one of the things I've noticed is that giving kindness to myself is not so much being like, oh, Dylan, I love you, you're such a good person. It's nothing like that. But it's whenever I make mistakes or notice myself getting angry or falling into like traps of my mind, like worrying about ego or lust or addictions, it's being like kind to yourself in the extent that you don't beat yourself up. You're not like, you're such a fucking idiot, why can't you figure this shit out? Or like, you don't do that to yourself. You kind of calm down and be like, whoa, hang on, like this is the craziest experience that anyone can have, like having a life. And we're all having that right now. And not being able to deal with that is just like a puppy not understanding like where it's supposed to shit. Like it's absolutely normal that we're fucked up in the way that we are, but we can't like beat ourselves up on it. So the most kindness I've felt to myself is just being like, it's okay, Dylan, like whatever you've done was meant for you to have been done. You didn't know any better. Don't place more blame on yourself than you need to, or not even any blame on yourself. You know, a lot of that to me is that kindness to yourself.
Yeah. Before I get on to my next question, I want to just say something a little bit that has to do with that, or just kind of like this whole question and answering. I want to say that I feel like you're always, because I've talked to you privately, I feel like you're always trying to help people out and like trying to be this positive light. And I know like you try really hard at it. I just wanted to say that while you were answering that question, this thought came to me where it was like seeing you strive towards a clear spiritual relationship and also just self-love and type of like, you know, working on yourself, seeing that and like literally seeing the growth happen throughout, it inspires, for example, me to keep on pushing forward in my quest. So in a way, like without even you, like with you helping yourself, it made me want to help myself. You get what I mean? Even more than I had already been doing. Like it's nice. It's like passive love. Like you just showing someone love without specifically being like, hey man, like Omar, like hope everything's going good with you. But instead by just you doing the right thing and keep moving forward, it's like saying that without saying it. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's a really good, that's an interesting observation, because I feel like I wouldn't have been able to put that into words, but I feel that with other people as well. Like you do feel that when you see someone who's doing the thing that you like feel connected to and feel is also your path, then you kind of get strength from them without ever having to directly interact with them. Like I get that strength from so many people. Like people like I've spent like years of my life listening to people on YouTube to the extent that I feel like I know these cunts. Like, I used to have like 20 people, pictures of 20 like philosophers and shit on my walls that I felt like I knew personally because I'd listened to them so much and their journeys, and like that in itself helped me move forward. So yeah, it's very interesting that you don't have to. I'd never consciously thought that you don't have to interact directly with someone to. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like what that realization might help you out as well is because we had this conversation where I know a lot of people, even down in the comments or in your main channel, like they reach out to you and I read them as well, and I'm sure you do as well. And you want to message all these people indirectly, but knowing the information, I think that we know now is that even at times when you're not interacting with them, you are interacting with them, because the way that you're presenting yourself on your daily basis, even in your music or even outside of it, is really pushing and showing a little bit more of you, and it's maybe showing a little bit more about themselves and what they need to be working on.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no shit.
Yeah. Well, I'll get to the next question, which is what did you miss the most about the outside world?
To be honest, nothing other than just internet is nice to have to actually be able to connect to those people, but to the extent that you're not drawn into it. But other than just like having Anya to be around and kind of remind me I'm a person that exists, not go crazy. There's not really much I miss. Like, if anything, I miss the forest. Like, I've honestly been feeling like I need to go back. Hey, it's so much nicer there without all of this shit.
Without noise.
Yeah.
I remember in your video you go like, I'm going to the forest because this world is so goddamn noisy. I screen recorded it and I was like, man, what a great intro to a song, you know? Like, why am I going out in the forest? Because this world is so goddamn noisy, and then boom, the song starts. Shit. I was thinking like, wow, I don't know, it was like the greatest intro to a song.
That would be a great sample.
So going back to the time you were there, do you feel as if time was moving slower or faster without like the technology and anything around?
It's it's hard to say. I don't think it was. I think if it, not that it necessarily felt longer or shorter or faster, but it felt like more full. Like, we had the same amount of time, but when I'm back here, I feel like time's shorter. Like, I go from one thing to another quicker. And by the end of the day, it still feels like as full of a day, but it feels like it happened faster. Maybe that is what you're asking. So the sense of time does go a lot faster when you have more distractions. And back there, it was kind of like, it felt like there was more space between doing things. But that didn't feel like it was dragging on, you know what I mean? It just felt more full and less quick.
So I remember one time on the trip, you went and you posted, like, you out in the forest, and I think it was the no refuge post. Yeah. And so you out there, you posted that. Were you allowed your phone, or is that something you smuggled in?
No, we were allowed phones and stuff. You were actually allowed to use the internet and stuff, but I just was like choosing to use it as little as possible because I didn't want, because I know how much I have on the internet to be distracted by. There were like other people there on their phones and stuff, but they're probably not, you know, having to reply to fucking 50 Instagram messages.
So while you were there, how, like, throughout the whole time, how much time do you think you spent on your phone?
It would have been, all I was ever doing on my phone was just messaging Anya either good night or good morning. So it would be like 20 minutes max, probably.
Okay, so as a slight comedic route, do you ever like sing Anya good night?
No, I don't.
Like during the time where it's time to rest?
No.
No? No. You don't go, good night.
Oh,
I don't like to talk much. No?
I probably said the first two lines like as a joke once or twice, but other than that, nah.
Oh, okay.
Good
uh,
night.
so, I know, right? So what do you think throughout the trip? What was the biggest battle that you were fighting in your mind?
Hmm. That's a bit. I don't even really know how to answer that. Hey, because there's. I think it was just this, like, somewhat of what I've been saying, just kind of like coming to terms with how flawed I am. A lot of why I think I was so addicted to the weed and continuously smoking that is because I didn't want to see myself in full reality, because that full reality was the fact that I'm just like everyone else, extremely flawed. Yeah. And so being able to face that was my biggest battle, I guess. And that kind of emerged in everything, like the addictions, trying to get away from the reality of myself, all of that. Yeah.
So you feel like, because we talked about kind of facing your problems and running away from them, what were the problems and things that you were running away from the most, or like past experience like that you
Yeah.
were running away from the most?
I was running away from, I think, well, I was running away from my responsibility because I know that I need to. The biggest thing I need to do in this world is like walk a path where I can speak my mind clearly, and I like engaging in all these things that were negative for me made me feel bad about myself, and therefore not able to speak my mind clearly because I'm scared of that mind being seen because it was so flawed. But I think I was like, yeah, fighting against that kind of, or like running away from the responsibility that I know I need to take in terms of living my potential, which is, yeah, speaking to people and spreading some kind of message, which is, yeah, not one particular sentence, but the message that we talk about, walking this particular path.
With the whole like, I think you just said it right now. It was like something of how like what's inside your mind of expressing that.
Hmm.
Do you think that people would look at you differently if you were to show them exactly like who you are inside your mind?
Yes. Yes, I do. And that's like one of the biggest fears I have, man. Like, yeah. Yeah, I can't understate that. I don't think anyone would ever see me how they see me if they could see my mind.
Uh, do you think that it's because like do you think that whatever that is, do you think that's something that uh, you believe is going to evolve into something else, or do you feel as if it's just like something that is very unorthodox to the world, and that's why you don't want to like speak
I
about
think
it?
it's just that unorthodoxness. Like, I don't actually. I think it's whatever it is like constantly evolving, and it's not necessarily actually anything that anyone wouldn't like, but it's just it's very unorthodox that I don't think anyone would be able to understand. And like, if you can't understand something like that, usually you just become afraid. Is my experience.
Mm.
Yeah.
And was there a time in your life where you did express it?
Yeah, I feel like I have probably been more expressive in the past. Like, yeah, I have been more expressive in the past with previous relationships, and it's not gone well. So it's kind of led to me making sure I don't do that again.
So like one time in the past or a few times in the past, you did get to that level with someone and things didn't go well the times that you did, so it kind of closed the Raz walls,
Yeah,
you
it's
know.
somewhat the doors of my heart were somewhat closed because of that. Yeah.
Will the demolition of the walls 17 ever come out?
Well, that actually, it's funny you say that because that album title actually is representative of that. The Tower 17 kind of represents a time in my life. Well, 17 in terms of the fact that I was 17 at the time, and that being the kind of time where I entered into my first relationship, where I was kind of at that point fully open, but to my detriment, you know? And so at that point, there was kind of a structure built within me. Well, I began to build a structure within myself from that point forward, which was like a castle which kept me away from the world, you know? It's these walls. And so the demolition of Tower 17 was kind of the first attempt to kind of break down those walls and open doors a bit.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And what's the number 17? Is there a significance, or did it just
17
ring
was
a
the
wrong
17 was the
the
age I
year?
was at when I first I had the first relationship, which kind of changed me, we'll say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the demolition of it is just kind of like it's just finally starting to get open a little bit more
Yeah,
about it. The walls that have been kind of being created.
exactly, yeah.
So when you went into that project, did you know that your writing style was going to change slightly, with being a little bit more vulnerable, or is
No,
just
not really.
continuous?
Just continuous kind of expression, and that it's more in hindsight that I ever realized a change in things, hey,
Mm. And
artistically.
the difference between multilinear and, for example, like the demolition of Tower 17. Uh, since did you spend more time writing multilinear than you did Tower
Yeah.
17?
Yeah,
Yeah.
multilinear was
What do you
over
think?
like 2-3 years. Why do I
Yeah,
think?
my first album was the same. I spent a lot of time, but I'm curious why you spent more time sitting on the project until like before and then after
I
with Tower
think
17.
just a lot of it was less confidence in terms of not thinking I could, so I would just put it off. Like I wanted to do this project, but I didn't know how, and also because I was just less fluent at making music back then. It would take me a lot longer to make any single song. Now I can make a song like that process is just so much smoother now that I can make music much easily. So it's a combination of those things. Hence also why once I released Multilinear and like Goodnight was such a success, I felt so much more confidence to release music, and had simultaneously spent that extra 3 years getting fluent at making it. So beyond Multilinear, that's how it was so easy just to pump out the next like 4 albums in a year. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah, Uh, so in regards to like a little bit into like the music, um, you do that song, "Suicide stuck in my brain, and I don't know why. I
Yeah.
don't wanna die." Exactly. So
Yeah.
yeah, that first of all, that song's a classic. Many people like that one's one of my favorites.
Fuck
And
yeah.
but since you had like those suicide stuck, was suicide stuck on the retreat?
Was I suicide stuck on the
Were
retreat?
you having like suicidal thoughts throughout the retreat or any time?
Yeah, it got there on the end of like that first midway through where I drove back for a little bit. Like that's where I was heading. I was feeling myself there. Yeah, I was feeling like this, you know what I mean? I wanted to cut some more some black lines into my face. And so when I was noticing that, I was like, all right, let's take this a bit serious.
So with this cut right here,
Yeah,
and
that one.
it's you. So okay, I always wanted to ask this. In
Mm.
your good night video, you're like in the mirror holding
Yeah,
something to
doing
your face.
yeah.
Did you make that one yourself?
The stick and
Did you go to a place?
no, this is done by myself. I did this one initially with an art scalpel. This was one of the first times I was feeling very suicidal. And simultaneously didn't really know what was like. Oh, this is one thing that was adding to it. I was also starting antidepressants, and like the first few weeks of antidepressants make you like they put your mind in a different space. So I had that going on, and also just feeling suicidal, and I like felt like a darkness within me that needed to be released. That's the best way I can explain it. So that I initially carved this one in with like an art scalpel, but then from that point forward, because I liked it and obviously when it added more, we used it's called a stick and poke needle. That's what's in that video. It's a stick and poke needle, and you just literally do it one dot at a time. So yeah, this is all initially. The circle was done the first time round by Anya because I didn't want to fuck up the circle. I wanted to have it a perfect circle, but beyond that point, I've gone over it all myself. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. It's all self job.
You did it yourself?
Yeah.
Dang, wow, that's wild. You know, because when I saw it in the video, I thought, oh, what an artistic way to show that, you know, he has the tattoo right there. But no, that's how it went down.
Yeah, that's how.
Okay, so intentionally,
all my tattoos are done by myself, hey.
Oh, really? The one in your chest, I thought you got that one professionally done.
Nah, it's all me.
So, wait, real quick, because you talked about like the cut here. Did you ever have like tendencies to self-harm?
That is my oh yeah I do. Like those are my tendencies. I punch shit and like hit my head against the wall sometimes. Like I used to do that a lot more, and I didn't realize it was self-harm, but I guess it was in hindsight. But the combination is, really just kind of like, when I really feel bad like that, I want to cut my face. And I want to like put tattoo ink in it. That's the urge I have. Because I know that gives me a release. Because I know that whatever I'm worried about that makes me feel suicidal is attachment to this ego or this self or this identity. And to cut my face is like to symbolically cut my identity. And so to cut away my identity is to release myself from suffering. It's like a very physical representation of a symbolic process.
Do you feel like you'd one day want to attain that without having to go through some type of like physical, you know, like like that type of way of doing it?
Yeah, ultimately, I would like to be able to just. I mean, yeah. Well, at the same time, I don't actually see a problem with it, to be honest. Like, this face isn't that important. You know?
I see your point. Yeah. Like, I definitely see your point. While you were out there in the forest, did you feel like writing any songs?
It's funny. I did have one moment where like I had this melody that came into my head. I couldn't get away, but at the same time, I knew when I would forget it, I wouldn't be able to remember it again. So I like took out my phone and just kind of like hummed the melody in. I like had like one or two lines, but other than that, like I felt pretty just happy to leave it until I got back. Hey.
Nice.
Yeah.
So do you feel like this experience will seep into your music?
Yes, yeah, it already has. I've written one song since I gotten back. Or not the whole song, but it was like a verse for a song with Sloth Boy. And even the words, like, I can already see my lyrics somewhat speaking on a different topic, like more of a spiritual topic and more reflective of who I actually am, rather than just kind of lamenting.
Can we dive, can you give us a little bit, not of a preview, but just kind of like what exactly you tackled on the song?
Well, there's just one of the lines that I was mentioning to Anya yesterday. The line is, the spaces between the words is where we breathe. That's one of the lines. And that's just very much speaking to the idea that we need to kind of have a bit of silence to breathe. Like spiritually. We will never grow spiritually unless we breathe in, and we can only breathe in silence. And I don't think I would have written a line like that prior to this retreat.
Damn, that's great. That's great. Did you figure out more about yourself? And if so, what?
I figured out I'm not only, well, to one extent I figured out that like, not figured out, but like we're always, usually we're aware that we come from parents and that those parents have molded us to a certain extent. I became somewhat more aware of the specific nature of how our parents mold us, and or specifically how I am kind of a product of my parents. But also I realize how that I'm only a product of my parents in the extent that I am like continuing to play that role. Like when a larger awareness opens up, you can choose really to play any role in this life, and that doesn't limit you to the person you are, who was modeled by your parents or modeled by anyone. You can model yourself, and that kind of not only comes from seeing yourself, but seeing, like, if we're all different plants, we need to actually see ourselves clearly. What type of plant am I? What do I need? This water here? Do I need this sunlight? Like, so that we can grow better. And now that I kind of have seen what type of plant I was, or I am, I know how to move forward in caring for that, so that it can become like more than it is already. I don't know. It's hard to put into words.
No. Yeah, I kind of see what you're saying. Is there certain things, for example, that came from the family or from different outside sources that became a little bit of who you are, and things that you know shouldn't be there, and that you're trying to like remove?
I think the part of what I was saying very early on, in terms of the feeling like not being able to very well socialize, like a lot of that I just kind of thought to myself was kind of, that's just who I am because that's the way I was raised. But I'm realizing more and more that I can, like you said, like there's actual evidence from the world that if you just engage with the world in a certain way, then it will engage with you back. And it's not for me just to think, well, I can't do that, but to think that I can do anything if I put my mind to it, beyond whatever limitations I've. For example, like my dad is I've always thought of my dad as like very similar to me in the extent that like doesn't talk to many people, doesn't like talking, doesn't really, and that's kind of allowed me to model myself like that when I don't necessarily have to be like that. Yeah.
Just a real quick side note to amplify on your statements, and to solidify that you're definitely accurate, is that my father is like the exact same way in reference to, you know, not speaking to too many people, and not really sharing a little bit too much of like what he's lived or what he goes through on a day-to-day basis, very suppressed. But I tackled it ever since a young age. I tackled it differently. I almost looked at that, I saw that it was a flaw, and I saw that it was something that I didn't want to become. And I tried very hard to combat it, even though naturally, of course, I would like to just, you know, hide away and, you know, never say anything to people, and not be in awkward situations, and not be vulnerable with people. And like, of course, I could fall into the same comfort that he fell into, but at the same time, I want to evolve past the parentals, because if you do not, then is the lineage or is the generations ever going to be evolving in a positive direction? And that's how generational cycles continue if one person doesn't, first of all, realize it, and then second of all, make the changes necessary to not repeat what has been shown to them. Only refining and protecting and moving forward, I feel like is what needs to be done.
Yeah, I feel that 100%. Well put. I agree.
Yeah. And
do you feel like that was, just quickly, do you feel like that was something, or you said you tackled that very young, at what age were you like conscious of the fact that this was something that you could not just continue?
Well, the thing is like, I remember this term floating around in the psychology community and like throughout the earth, which was, oh man, like you're a product of like what your parents, and like what your parents, like you're always going to be attracted to this type of girl because of the type of person, this person. And I just remember thinking about that stuff and thinking how ridiculous it was. I'm not sure how old I was. It was just like, we're all humans and we're all different. And I believe that that there were certain things that I was that didn't come from my mom or didn't come from my dad.
Yeah.
Why is it that the pursuits that I had, the things that I exposed into my eyes had nothing to, like, did they not have a say? The time that I spent on certain literature, did that not have a say in who I
Yes,
am?
yes.
I
That's
didn't think
brilliant.
that
Yeah.
those things rooted me to them so strongly. And when I was really young, I just remember seeing like how my dad was, and just thinking to myself like, I don't want to be like that in those aspects, you know. But when I got older, when I was like 21, I believe, that's when I was like, okay, there are certain things that you need to change. And if you don't change them now, they will become lifestyles,
Mm.
and they will become things that is who you are. And then what happens? The anger thing, I also used to get really like easily angered. And I
Mm.
realized that the closer I am on my spiritual path, the less angry I get. But the
Yeah.
further I stray from my spiritual path, the angrier I get.
Yeah.
And those habits come back. So it's like we're on this path, you and I. But if we like drift away
Yeah.
from it, those habits
They're
that,
right there
yes,
waiting. Yeah.
yeah, they're right there waiting. And
Mm.
maybe they did come from the family, maybe they did come from what we were exposed to, but that doesn't mean that that has to be us. And
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Very well put. Holy shit. Yeah. Of course. And it makes so much. It is almost ridiculous when you think of how you were saying it prior, like that people would just say you're a product of your parents, and why wouldn't you be a product of like every other thing you've been exposed to? It makes perfect sense.
Exactly.
And that
Exactly.
kind of
It's
like,
just that.
you go on, yeah, yeah.
No, no, go ahead, continue, Raz.
I was just gonna say as well, and that the fact that unless we're walking that kind of path we know is right, then we just fall back into those patterns unconsciously.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah. I was gonna say, when it comes to like that specific parental like situation that obviously like, created something within your life, like, uh when did you start realizing that you didn't want to like be a product of what you were exposed to? Like, when did you have some of these realizations?
Well, I knew I didn't want to be like my dad very young, but that was less in terms of what we're speaking about now. Like, what we're speaking about now in terms of like like looking completely past it as a kind of rooting or like place where I've been rooted from. That's only a recent thing that I'm managing to really look past. But I do remember early on, like for most memory, not wanting to be like my dad, but not necessarily even knowing what my dad was that he was being, because he was so reserved. Like, I knew I didn't want to be like him, but I didn't know necessarily what it was he was even being. And then I kind of unconsciously just fell into being that because I didn't know what it was. But then when I became aware that I was actually similar again, that's the kind of place I've found myself at now, realizing that despite being similar, that's something that's not can't limit me from walking the path. Yeah.
Yeah. And one other thing that I wanted to say was that we forget that the more time we spend with something, obviously the more that it affects us. So if we're constantly spending time with people who are isolated, or people who are reserved, or people
Mm.
who don't express emotion, of course that's something that we do and we start doing to the people around us, because
Yeah.
that's just what we're exposed to.
Yeah.
But
Oh
if
shit.
we spend 10 years exposed to that type of material, but we spend 5 years diligently taking care of those bad habits, that's when our new habits become our new personality and our
Yeah.
new character, which was the character we should have had back then. That's why even with our parentals, who we have as parents, isn't their fault just because they didn't have all the answers. But
Yeah.
it's responsibilities to
Mm.
make sure to make these changes for the next time. So then now our children, if we choose to have them, will have less of those, because we took out what we used what worked, and we used what was right, and we took out the other ones with time, a lot of time, because we have to combat something that
Yeah.
we spent 10 years, 20 years of our life exposed to.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
It's
something I
tough,
think
but
was
it's to be
understated as
done.
well. It's literally that's just exposure. You just pick up what you're exposed to. We're all mirrors in an extent.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Do you mind if we take a quick break only because we can do the cut now and then you can just cut this little part out where I said